A Speaker must be in love with democracy. They must be in love with democracy. They cannot use their role as a mechanism to wield power and promote privilege or protect privilege. That is not what this chamber is for. The 150 people elected to this chamber have a solemn duty to their electorates, and it's about democracy. Now, I've never seen the member for Mackellar sitting in the chair and being fair and impartial and bringing that. I think the Prime Minister said that the role should restore dignity. Well, I take offence at that, because the 43rd Parliament had dignity. Just because you didn't act in a dignified way does not mean that the Parliament didn't have dignity. Now, when we unpack democracy, we could look at what the members have done. Let's look at whether the member for Mackellar followed that great Liberal tradition of looking at the policy and crossing the floor. If she's prepared to be bipartisan. I've only seen 2 parliaments, and I've only seen 2 people in this chamber cross the floor on a topic. Only 2 MPs. I think the member for McKillen did it about asylum seekers, and he was rewarded by being totally overlooked. We had the member for Wentworth cross the floor about the ETS, and he was rewarded by being placed on the cover of the Real Solutions brochure. I also went to the other place. And saw Senator Sue Boyce cross the floor the day after the member for Warringah was made leader, and she was rewarded by being overlooked and then booted out of Parliament. I know the member for New England has crossed the floor, and I look forward to seeing how he goes when it comes to voting on GrainCorp. I'm sure he will talk tough and walk soft. So let's look at how the member for Mackellar and the member for McEwen have treated democracy. And the best way to analyse is how they've voted on legislation that brings the votes to Australian people. Let's look after the election, the 2010 election review, where we tried to get 1.5 million people back on the electoral roll. Look at the report of the member for Mackellar, a dissenting report into that election, a dissenting report. Well, and then it has also been suggested, I'm sorry to say this, member for McEwen, that perhaps you are not as, maybe we should support the member for Mackellar for the sisterhood rather than the member for McEwen. You have a Y chromosome, she doesn't. So let's have a look. There is a saying that the head slave whips the hardest. Let's have a look at how the member for Mackellar has treated the sisterhood when given the opportunity. When given the opportunity to stand out in front of a poster out front of this place saying, "Ditch the witch," to saying, "Julia, Bob Brown's bitch," what did she do? Did she apologise? Did she apologise for that? Never. Never apologised for that. And she actually said the people that had those signs were good, decent Australians. This is the fact. That's the fact. We're about to make a decision about the democracy in this place. I think very seriously about these decisions. So, obviously it is an important role, and it's good to have a bit of humour, and I have seen the member for Mackellar in the last 6 years make 2 good jokes. She made a joke about the size of Julia Gillard's nose. Then she made a joke about the clothes that Julia Gillard wore. They were quite funny. But the humour of someone in the chair needs to have a touch of self-deprecation about it. I think the member for Mackellar has deprecation down pat, but that is not the case. Now, the reality is we should choose the member for McEwen for the sake of democracy in this chamber.
have to start having solutions rather than being all complaint and no responsibility. If the #1 whinger in Australia was a reality TV show, Madam Speaker, there'd be no point in any other contestant entering it, because if Bill Shorten entered it, he would win it. But it's time on Thursday night. The Leader of the Opposition has an opportunity, Madam Speaker.
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat.
You're such a cunt.
The Minister will refer to people by their correct titles.
I will, Madam Speaker. I withdraw. On Thursday night, Madam Speaker, the Opposition has to do. Now, Labor has just demonstrated for the last 20 minutes that they will do anything to stand in the way of lowering electricity prices in this country. Electricity Bill Shorten, as his first political act in the Parliament, has desired to get his Manager of Opposition Business to block the repeal of the carbon tax.
Point of order. Point of order from the Leader of Manager of Opposition Business.
Madam Speaker, a large number of comments were made yesterday about people being referred to by correct titles. To have the Leader of the House immediately abrogating that is inappropriate and should be withdrawn.
He was not actually addressing a member by any title. He was merely using a description, and I do not find the term unparliamentary. The Leader of Government is Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker.
I recognise the Honourable the Manager of Opposition Business.
Madam Speaker, I'm not sure whether you heard the description that was given, but what we had was something that even the Prime Minister yesterday acknowledged could not be used within the chamber.
And you're raising the matter a second time. I call the Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. During this question time, on 8 occasions, the Prime Minister has lacked the courage to admit that he broke his promises. Enough is enough. Will this Prime Minister come to the dispatch box, look Australians in the eye and apologise for his lies?
The Leader of the Opposition will withdraw unparliamentary language.
Madam Speaker, every Australian knows the truth.
I said the member will withdraw.
I withdraw.
So we're lacking a question. You might like to rephrase it.
Right. During this question time, on 8 occasions, this Prime Minister has lacked the courage to apologise.
The Leader of the Opposition will resume his seat. The Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, you very generously allowed the Leader of the Opposition to mount an argument that was masquerading as a question. He's now trying to do it a second time. You've given him another chance. He either has to ask a genuine question or you should sit him down and take the next question from this side of the House.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
I don't need the point. The point that I was making was I made the Leader of the Opposition withdraw the word which was totally unparliamentary, and he knew it. And I asked him to. He has now withdrawn it, so there is no question before the chair. I said he may rephrase it. That doesn't mean to use the same argumentative material.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Throughout this question time, on 8 occasions, the Prime Minister has had put to him what he said before the election. Will the Prime Minister now admit that he's broken his promises and apologise to the Australian people for misleading them?
Misleading didn't help either. There are other forms of the House.
I am happy to get the thesaurus out. Australians know what it is. Fabrications, untruths, guile. He didn't say what he was going to do before the election, what he did in last night's budget. Will he apologise?
I call the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, if I may say to the Leader of the Opposition that he is all politics, no policy, all complaint, no solutions, and I might offer this thought to members opposite, that confected moral outrage is no basis for governing our country, and it's one of the reasons why members opposite are utterly unfit for government. Now, Madam Speaker, what this country needs— The member for
Isaacs will desist. The Prime Minister has the call.
What this country needs is a government which is prepared to confront the reality that our country faces. It is prepared to confront the reality of debt and deficit stretching out as far as the eye can see, of the debt and deficit disaster which members opposite, which the Labor Party created.
But I was going to say prospect.
Correct. Former.
McMahon.
Madam Speaker, my questions to the Treasurer. I refer the Treasurer to his admission on ABC 7:30 last night that the new GP payment and the income tax levy are taxes. I also refer the Treasurer to both his and the Prime Minister's repeated promises before the election that there would be no new taxes under the coalition government. After this deceit, how can the Australian people ever believe anything the Treasurer or the Prime Minister have to say?
I call the Honourable the Treasurer.
Well, I didn't say that. That was the... Oh, what was that? Will you withdraw?
The Honourable the Treasurer has the call. The Leader of the House.
The member for Isaacs made a very unparliamentary intervention, and I would ask him to withdraw it.
I would ask...
Madam Speaker. The Treasurer made the comment on television last night. We've got the for him to stand up in the Parliament and deny...
No, we will not be debating in question time. The point was made that the member for Isaacs made an unparliamentary comment. Would he withdraw to help?
I'll withdraw.
Thank you. I call the Honourable the Treasurer.
The interviewer
happening at the moment is that he's telling his senators to stand in the way of a $7.6 billion 500.
The Minister will resume his seat. The member for Graindler on a point of order. The member for Graindler has the call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Minister was asked about his government's policies, not the opposition's. If he wants to speak about the government's policies and taxes on carbon, he can talk about the petrol tax increase that is coming in tonight.
There is no point of order. The Minister has